Greetings, everybody. It is 2 p.m. Eastern, and we are excited to kick off our keynote speech. Before the keynote speech, I just want to first give an introduction to our keynote speaker. Dr. Ahmad Rahim is an award-winning author, educator, entrepreneur, Fulbright recipient, and TEDx speaker. His story was turned into the short documentary Against the Odds, a 2016 Bronze Award winner at the Fame US International Film Festival and adapted into a Syracuse stage theater production titled Tales from the Salt City, which is an extension of the acclaimed Undesirable Elements series written by celebrated playwright and Presidential National Medals of Arts recipient Ping Chong. Dr. Rahim has been featured in The Huffington Post, Forbes magazine, Intelligent HQ, World Class magazine, The Post Standard, Vice, Rutgers The Humanist and CEO magazine, and interviewed on the BBC, NPR, StoryCorps, PBS, and multiple podcast shows. He authored Resilience, From the Killing Fields to Boardroom, and co-authored The Inclusive Leader, an applied approach to diversity, change and management, and foundations of social responsibility and its application to change. For his community work and advocacy, Dr. Rahim was given a city proclamation for volunteerism by Syracuse Mayor Ben Walsh and received the Volunteer of the Year Award from CNY Business Journal. A recipient of the Alumni Achievement Award from Leadership Greater Syracuse, Community Impact Award by SUNY Empire State College, and was honored with the John H. Mulroy Founders Award by Onondaga Community College's Board of Trustees. He was also recognized by the United Nations Foundation as an Impact 100 honoree, given a congressional award for civic engagement. His professional achievements earned from the 40 Under 40 Business Leader Award from Whitman School of Management and named Certified Manager of the Year by the Institute of Certified Professional Managers of James Madison University. Dr. Rahim's academic achievements and resilience earned him an honorary PhD from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology and honorary ASC degree from SUNY Onondaga Community College. He was inducted as an honorary member into Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society, Golden Key International Honor Society, and the Future Business Leaders of America Phi Beta Lambda. He also received an Outstanding Alumni Award by the American Association of Community Colleges and given the Award of Distinction from Southwest University. As an educator, he won the Entrepreneur Teaching Excellence Award from Oklahoma State University and Teaching Innovation Award from Bellevue University. Dr. Rahim currently serves as a Kotauk Family Endowed Chair and Associate Professor at Bellevue University and Principal Consultant Founder at Inclusive 360 LLC. Dr. Rahim earned advanced postdoctoral credentials from Harvard University, Tulane University, and the University of Maryland Global Campus. He has a Doctor of Management and 2 graduate degrees in business from Colorado Tech and completed his undergraduate education at SUNY Empire State College. Adil is honored to present our 2021 keynote speaker. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ahmad Rahim.
Thank you so much, Rich, for this kind introduction. I should have given you a shorter bio.
Well, there's a lot of amazing stuff in there. That's great to share.
I appreciate it, and I'm honored to be here. So let me just share my screen with everybody. All right, let's do this. All right, so hopefully you can all see my screen. Get rid of this. All right, there we go. You know, when it comes to doing these virtual conferences, it's the technology part that gets you all nervous and anxious and jittery inside. But once again, I am honored to be here. And, you know, these type of conferences, especially when it comes to the theme, I hold very dear close to my heart because online education has transformed my life. I wouldn't say change my life. I would say transform my life. And I'll explain further. Right. So in this picture, actually, this is taken at the United Nations. It was through the Dear World Project. And I was asked to talk about immigration reform. So I provided my own experience and my own education and background and talked about how a lot of immigrants and refugees come to America to start businesses. So I used business education, research, and data to explain the benefits of supporting immigration reform. Right. So let's get started. So in this picture is me. Right. I was born in 1978 in a concentration camp in the killing fields of Cambodia. The day I was born, my father was being tortured and eventually executed. I had an older brother that died of starvation and illness. Now, we were in the refuge in this concentration camp for almost 2 years. And my family, they started noticing that every day more and more people were disappearing. So they made the decision that in order to survive, they needed to escape. Right? But before the day of my father's execution, my mother decided she needed to see my father. She needed to see him one last time. So in the middle of the night, she snuck out of a hut and found my father in one of those buildings that they were imprisoning people. And eventually she found him. And she told me that what she saw was someone she did not recognize. You see, my father had been tortured, beaten, and left to starve for weeks. And he had no idea where he was. He had no idea who my mother was. So after several minutes, it probably felt like hours of trying to talk to my father, my mother started walking away. And then my father moved towards her and asked her a question that changed my life and kind of changed my perspective on a lot of things in life. When I heard this story is that he asked her how I was doing. Now, here's a man that had been tortured and beaten and had no idea who he was, couldn't recognize his wife, but wanted to know how I was doing. He wanted to know how his last remaining bloodline was doing. And my mother said I was fine. She said I was doing okay. And that was the last time my mother saw my father alive. The escape from the concentration camp to Thailand, to the refugee camp, in itself was an amazing story. It took several days. My mother also told me that during the trip, a family that was walking in front of her actually stepped on a landmine and exploded. And just like that, an entire family was gone. She also said I got really sick and became so ill, I was not responsive, that I became very limp. And people started telling her to leave me in the jungle, that it was more merciful for her to leave me behind, that she was actually carrying a dead body, that I was gone already. But my mother refused to give up, right? She refused to give up on me, and she kept on pushing, and she did everything she could to keep me alive. And eventually we got to the refugee camp, right? And initially we celebrated. We were happy to be here, right? We were happy to be in this refugee camp. But the refugee camp also had problems, right? This was a lawless environment. And the Thai people, or the Thai military, did not want us to be there, right? To them, we were taking advantage of their resources, right? That we were causing them to be a part of this war that they didn't want to be a part of. So they did not treat us well. And because this was a lawless environment, women were being taken advantage of. Sometimes husbands would go out looking for work and never come back. Children sometimes would go missing. But one of the great things about the refugee camp and being an Asian family is that you end up finding people to create a new family, right? And it went from just me, my mother, and a few people that we escaped with to an older sister. My mother ended up adopting the woman you see with the letter number 3, with the next to me. I'm number 4, right in the middle, right? And she adopted her because she had no parents. She was the last survivor of her village. So my mother adopted her. And then she found my stepfather, who was number 1. And they started a new family. And then she adopted who became my uncle, which is number 5. And they had my youngest sister in the refugee camp, right? So, we went from having just the 2 of us to now having this new family that's intact, right? And one of the great things about having a full family is that you're more likely to get sponsored, right? You're more likely to get sponsored to go to Europe, to go to Canada, to come to America. And the great thing was that we were chosen to come to America, right? But here's the key, here's the thing, is that when you get sponsored, they don't just place you in the suburbs, right? They don't just put you in this middle class, neighborhood, right? They often put you in some of the roughest neighborhoods in the country, right? And here's the thing. So they placed us in Brooklyn, New York in the 80s, right? This is this is before the hipsters moved in, right? This is before, Jay-Z and Beyonce, moved in like that, before the Barclays Center. Downtown Brooklyn was not a place you wanted to be in. And Brooklyn in the 80s was almost like another genocide, right? This was during the height of the crack epidemic, right? This is when the Bronx was being burnt down. This is when riots and looting was happening in different boroughs relating to police brutality, race riots, drugs, and gang warfare and fighting over turfs and things like that. And the neighborhood that we lived in was Sunset Park, Brooklyn, right? We lived on 61st Street. And the crazy thing about our street, from what I remember, is that no one got along, right? It was majority Dominicans, Haitians, Puerto Ricans, and a few Cambodians and Vietnamese, and no one got along, right? No one got along. I mean, there was constant fights and shootings and things like that. But, one of the positive things that I remember in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, was the summertime, right? And what made the summertime great was the block parties, right? The block parties, I mean, if you've never been to a block party, especially in the 80s, I want you to envision one of those Spike Lee movies, right? This is when the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, the city, and a bunch of other organizations teamed up and they shut down a block, right? They shut down several blocks in different boroughs. And all of a sudden, these streets became like, party central, right? All of a sudden, these people that did not get along, and that was fighting constantly over territory, over money, over race, all of a sudden were fighting over barbecue, right? It was like, whose barbecue is better? Whose music was better? It's merengue, it's salsa, it's hip hop. So all of a sudden, this was a true melting pot of people coming together and celebrating their differences, right? The music's blasting, girls playing hopscotch, just amazing smells, just amazing smells from everyone's barbecue and the local food scene. And my favorite thing in the world was when they turned the fire hydrant on. You see, I can't swim. I mean, even today I can't swim. I'll drown, right? So the closest thing I can get to swimming in public was when the fire hydrant turned on, right? Because that's when I swim like a beast. You could not tell me I can't swim. So when the fire hydrant came on, our shorts came off. Like, listen, this was back in the 80s. Perfectly fine to wear tighty whities in public. No one said anything. No one did anything. It was cool. I mean, you probably couldn't get away with that now. But back then, yeah, tighty whities were the thing for boys to wear when they're swimming. So we were, we were swimming like a beast and we were cool, right? So we were swimming, having fun, music blasting, kids laughing. It was beautiful. But then one day, something tragic happened. Something so tragic that it changed the rest of my life. You see, while we were playing, I didn't notice right away that things started shifting and things started changing really quickly. And all of a sudden that those laughters turned into screaming, right? And the loud music turned into cars just honking at each other, and doors closing, and just windows closing, and people running, and going left and right. And all of a sudden I just couldn't figure out, who's who anymore. All of a sudden my friends disappeared and I got scared and I got worried. So I was trying to get to my stoop. And as I was walking away from the fire hydrant, going towards my building, there was a group of people that surrounded my stoop. And I could see them pushing and pointing fingers at each other. So as I got closer, I could hear things that you can tell it was escalating, right? It just, the arguments got louder, the pushing became more aggressive. And as I got closer and closer, all I heard was bam. And I remember that I just couldn't hear anything. And there was this loud ringing in my ear, just extremely loud ringing in my ear. And I couldn't really see anything. And there was lots and lots of pain in my arm, pain in my face. And I was trying to get away from the situation. And in the corner of my eye, I could see this door open across the street. And this Puerto Rican man stood out. And he's like, mira man aquí. So he's calling me over. And I'm running. But it felt like everything was in slow motion. When I got to the door, he pulled me in. And as he pulled me in, I could see people huddled up on the stairs in the corner crying. And all of a sudden they started pointing at me. They started screaming, pointing at me. And I looked down at my leg and half of my leg was blown off. Then I blacked out. When I woke up, the entire community had came together to try to save my life. There were people holding me down. Someone took off his shirt and put it on my leg. Someone was trying to get me water. Someone was trying to find my mother. And the same Puerto Rican man was trying to organize something around me. I could see him talking to people, pointing, and all of a sudden a taxi showed up. And they picked me up and they threw me in the taxi. But then the taxi driver got into an argument with this Puerto Rican man and a few other guys. And I found out later they were arguing over who was going to pay for this cab, right? Who was going to pay to get this cab cleaned up. And then all of a sudden, the same Puerto Rican man started talking to everybody else around me. People started donating money. He threw the money to the cab driver and we're off. And I blacked out. When I woke up, there was another man sitting next to me. This is a young African-American man, and he was holding his stomach. And he kept on saying, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Oh God, I can't breathe. Oh God, I can't breathe. And I found out that young man died next to me in the taxi. When we got to the hospital, I remember the doctor and nurses arguing, pointing at me. And I realized they were concerned that my parents were not with me. and they did not have any medical records. And they were unsure if I was allergic to anything, but they knew that I lost a lot of blood, and they had to stitch me up right away. They had to give me blood right away. So without any type of medication, without any type of anesthesia, they started stitching me, right? They started working on me. And, I swear I could feel like every single stitch going in. And it was so painful. I blacked out a few times during surgery. When I woke up, I found out it took my mother almost a day and a half to find me, right? This is before cell phones. This is before beepers, right? And we didn't have a car. So she had to get on a train and hit every local hospital and clinic trying to find me. Right? And when she saw me, she was holding back tears. And finally, she whispered to me, she said that, there's no way we could stay in Brooklyn. There's no way we could stay here and survive, right? There's no way that you could stay here and survive. So that day, she made the decision that she was going to relocate to Syracuse, New York, right? Now, I wish I could say there was a happy ending, right? But Syracuse, New York had its own issues, right? This is upstate New York. And once again, we went from, struggling with poverty, struggling with racism, discrimination, right? To experiencing the same thing, but in a smaller town with less diversity. And also, this is when my stepfather started becoming more and more abusive, right? He became abusive towards me, abusive towards my mother. And one day, he came to work. He came home early from work. Usually he works till like 6 p.m. This day he came home around 3 or 2 o'clock. He didn't say anything to me. He just walked in the house, went to my bedroom, took my bed sheets, took my clothes, went in the backyard and set them on fire. Then he told me that I was bad luck, that I was the reason why he lost his job and the reason why his life was so bad. And he told me in order for him to change the luck, he would have to kill me. That he would have to kill me in order for his life to be better. And I was scared. I knew he was serious. So at 12 years old, that same day, that same evening, I packed up my clothes, got some food, got some money, and ran away. And I was homeless for 2 weeks. And the only time I went to school was to sleep, eat, and try to escape, right? I try to stay in school as long as I can to get some rest. And eventually, I was able to find refuge in my adopted sister's house. Right? You see, my adopted sister at this time had become an adult. My stepfather had also abused her. So she left, got married, and started a new family. And she was looking for me. And she invited me in. And I stayed with her for the next 3 years. But while living with my sister, my mother and my siblings was always in the back of my mind. I knew that abuse is not changing. If anything, it gotten worse. My mother would sneak out of the house and not tell him that she was seeing me, bringing me presents and clothes and things like that, and always keeping me up to date on my siblings. So for the next 3 years, I did not see my stepfather. And once in a blue moon, my mother would show up with my brother and sisters, and I get a chance to speak with them and catch up with them. But I started noticing that, that things were getting worse at home. So after a fight with my uncle and my sister, I decided it was time for me to go back to be with my mother. So I told her that, that I felt that this was the right time for me to come back and that I will do my best to help out with the family. So my stepfather said it was okay. And I came back home. But that night that I came back home, the fighting just escalated. And they just started just screaming at each other, throwing things at each other. And then the only thing that I could do at that point was tell my mother she needed to leave him. Like kept on saying to my mother, we should leave him. It's time to go. We don't need him. And he turned at me. He turned around, he looked at me and goes, "How dare you disrespect your father? How dare you disrespect me? You're living in my house. How dare you disrespect your father?" And I was like, "You're not my father. You're not my father. I know my father. My father died in the concentration camp." You see, the story that I told you in the beginning, I did not know about that story until I was about 15, right? So this entire time, I thought my stepfather was my biological father. And it wasn't until I got into an argument with my uncle and adopted sister that the truth came out, right? So when I got back home, I knew things were going to change because I saw him differently. I was not afraid of him anymore, right? So when he said that to me and I reacted and said that he was not my father, he was caught off guard. And before I could do anything, he charged at me. Like he took this one quick swing and my mother jumped right in front of it. And he knocked her out cold. And all of a sudden, I don't remember what happened. All I do remember was I was on top of him and I was just swinging, I was punching and I was screaming and I was crying and there was blood everywhere. And in the corner of my eye, I saw my sister and brother, my little sister and brother standing there crying, looking at me, standing over their father. And then all of a sudden I felt a hand on my shoulder and it was my mother and she pulled me off of him. And he got up and he went towards the kitchen, got some knives, came back into the living room and stood there looking at us with two large butcher knives in his hand. And all I could think was, like, what am I going to do here? Like, what can I do here? So the only thing I could do was push my sister and brother into the bedrooms and stand in front of my mother and look for something to protect ourselves. But before I could move and do something, he put the knives on the coffee table and sat down in the chair and just starts laughing and just would not stop laughing. So my mother said, "Run." And I ran outside. I went to the neighbor's house, called the police, and the police got him. And we haven't seen him since. And that was over 30 years ago, right? Now, things started getting better, right? At first, things started getting better. I thought we were in a better place because now my stepfather was gone, right? The abuse was gone. But we lost, someone that contributed to the family, the head of household, right? And eventually my mother had to take on multiple jobs. I had to take on multiple jobs, and did things that I was not proud of, to make money. And it was also destroying my grades, right? It's like I was not going to school. My grades had basically plummeted. I was 2 grades behind. And then one day going to school, my student advisor called me to talk to me. And she had told me that there's no way that I could graduate high school. I was in 10th grade now, right? So I was in 10th grade. I had 2 grades left. And here's my academic advisor telling me there's no way I will graduate high school. She recommended that I drop out and pursue my GED. Now here's the thing when it comes to, Asian family, right? Regardless of our circumstances, regardless of our background, education is still something that we're very proud of, right? Especially for our parents. Like the only thing my mother ever wanted me to do was to graduate high school. That's all she wanted, right? Because this was something we didn't have back in Cambodia. School was something you had to pay for, right? So coming to America, the one thing she always wanted me to do was focus on school. And here I was being told in 10th grade that there was no way that I was going to graduate, that I was 2 grades behind, that because of my constant fighting, skipping school, that the school technically did not want me to be here. So when I left her room, I was ready to fight. I was ready to cause some chaos. And I was wandering the hallway, and a man by the name of Willie Dardell stopped me. You see, Dardell was the vice principal at Fowler High School. He was someone that we all looked up to, right? He was someone that we knew grew up in our neighborhood and went off to college and became a principal later on and still continued to give back to the community. And plus, he was this towering figure in the school that we all respected. He was like our Morgan Freeman, basically, right? Had this deep, deep voice. And he saw me struggling and he saw that I was angry and he pulled me aside and he spoke to me. And after listening to my story, he goes, "Listen, Emad, if you really want to graduate high school, I can help you. I can help you, but you have to be serious and you have to meet me halfway. I will do everything possible, but I need you to take this serious. And I need you, like seriously, I need you to meet me halfway, right?" And this is my first taste of non-traditional education, right? Of non-traditional education in public high school in the 90s, right? So he brought me down to the basement of my high school to a room that I did not know exists. And this program was called OLC, Occupational Learning Center. Like we called it One Last Chance, right? And it was a program where you spend half of your day in school and you learn the basics. Like this was going to be a non-Regents diploma, right? So you are learning the basics, you're learning math, you're learning science, you're learning English and social studies. And then you spend the rest of your day learning a trade, right? And I went to the school called Central Tech, where I learned auto mechanics and radio engineering, right? And that was very powerful for me, right? Because here's a father figure that pushed me, that supported me, that did not give up on me, but also a program that got me, right? That understood what I needed, that I didn't have a traditional path in regards to achieving my public school education. And here was this program that I did not know existed. So I was in that program for 2 years, right? And after 2 years, I graduated, right? Not with a GED, but with a high school diploma, right? And I went from this student that was getting D's and F's and 2 grades behind. Now listen, I was a special ed student, like a real special ed student in a special ed classroom in elementary school. Middle school, I was placed in what they call the resource room. I was also an ESL student in elementary school. So when I got to high school, I was already 2 grades behind. I was labeled with a learning disability, but no one could tell me what that meant. They just told me that I learned different, but could not explain what that meant. And I did not get any additional resources or support, right? So here I am graduating, walking the stage, and I saw Willie Dardell up there, right? I saw him giving everyone this diploma, and I was really excited, and I went to him, grabbed this, one of those fake diplomas, right? So I grabbed it, gave him this big hug, and was ready to celebrate with him. I was ready to like jump the stage and dance and do all that stuff. And he pulled me in and he goes, "Emad, congratulations. What's next?" I was like, "What's next? I just graduated, man. I don't know what's next. I'm just happy." He goes, No, you don't have time for that. We got to figure out what's next. Right. But here's the thing, I was not thinking about college. No one in my neighborhood went to college. right? There was no teacher, talking about SATs and doing school visits and, and helping on my FAFSA and things like that. There was none of that. I just graduated high school, and none of that was part of our conversation. That was not part of our curriculum. And here's this man, pulling me in and saying, you need to do better. We need to figure this out. So within 2 weeks, he brought me to Onondaga Community College, which was just up the street from where I lived. And I had no idea this place existed. And I don't know how he did it, because he was not my dad, but he completed all of my application for me. He completed my financial aid. He spoke to people, got me an EOP, and got me accepted, right? And it was amazing being in college. But here's the thing, it didn't change my circumstance. It didn't change my situation. It didn't change my problem, right? I was still the oldest in my family. I was working, sometimes 3 to 4 jobs, right? Working evenings, nights, weekends, and giving that money to my mother, and then trying to find school to fit in all this. And then on top of that, no one explained to me what college is, what is expected of me, what needs to change of me in order for me to be successful in college. There was no training, there was no orientation, there was no preparation. They just assume you knew what you're supposed to do, right? So the thing was when I entered Onondaga Community College, I treated it like high school, because no one told me it was not high school, right? And I was not the only one. The hallways, the hallways were full of people like me, skipping class, playing spades, right? Going out to eat when we're supposed to be in class and things like that. And I was struggling. Like, I was really struggling. And after 4 years of being in a 2-year college, I was placed on academic probation, and I lost my EOP scholarship. Now, usually that would be the end of it, right? Well, that would be just the end of this story. But something amazing happened to me one day, right? There was a guy by the name of Nicholas Poulis, right? I want you to remember this, Professor Nicholas Poulis. And he had a class early in the morning, like 8 o'clock in the morning. It's like a class you don't want to be in. 8 o'clock in the morning. It was a human service class. And I had just worked a late night shift being a security guard at a bank. So here I am, no sleep, just got done working, and I had my security uniform on, right? So I come into class, and I thought that if I sat in the front row, if I sat right in the front row, I won't fall asleep. Like, I would have to I was forced to pay attention to him. So I get into class, sat in the front row. I swore it was like within seconds I fell asleep, right? And I don't know how long I was sleeping, but my spidey senses started tingling, right? Started going off. And something told me, it's like, Emad, you need to wake up. Like, Emad, you have to wake up. It's time for you to wake up. It's important that you wake up, right? So I got up, and no lie, there was a pile of drool, like a huge pond of drool all over my table. And it was so much, it had created a waterfall off of my desk and onto the floor. And now there's a puddle of drool on the floor too. So I got up, I wiped off the drool off my face, looked around, went towards the back of the classroom, and went back to sleep. and I woke up because the class had ended. And as I'm walking out the classroom, my classmates pull me aside and they go, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I was like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. Just tired. I worked overnight shift. Listen. Did you know what happened? You know what happened in class today? And I was like, nah, I was sleeping. And they go, listen, you snored like so loud, like your snoring was so loud that Nicholas stopped his lecture. And he stood over you and looked at you and shook his head. And I was like, damn, right? And then they said something that was powerful, right? He goes, Nicholas, while shaking his head, he goes, let him rest. He said, let Emad rest. I know him. He's trying his best. Just let him rest. And continued on with his lecture. And I got really emotional. I felt really bad. So I went looking for Nicholas Boulis. And I went to his office and I went to apologize. I was like, Nick, I'm so sorry. And he goes, no, you don't need to apologize. I know you have a lot on your plate. And the thing is, you came to class. Like, you didn't need to come to class, but you came to class. That says something about you. And he goes, but I need you to do me a favor. I need you to take a test for me. And I go, what type of test? He said, don't worry about it. Just, I noticed something's up with your writing. You know, I looked at your notes, your essays. Just take some tests, right? So I took some tests. Well, I took a test. That test turns to another test, and it turns to multiple tests until. And I didn't ask any questions. Like, I figured I just owe it to Nicholas to do these things. And then he called me in his office one day, and he goes, Emad, got some news for you, man. I don't know if you know this, but I think you're dyslexic. I go, yeah. And in my head, I'm like, what is this? Right? So he goes, do you know what dyslexia is? And I was like, yeah, I know what that is. And in my head, I was thinking, like, how did I catch dyslexia? Like, how did I catch this? Right? Because it sounds nasty, whatever it is, right? So he's explaining to me, and he goes, it's a learning disability. And I go, yeah, I know I got a learning disability. But it's nothing new. And he goes, Emad, this is great news. This is wonderful news. Do you realize this is great news? And I was like, how is this great news? You just told me I caught dyslexia, right? And he goes, Emad, this is great news because you could learn. We know you could learn. You just learn different. And now that we know you could learn, but you just learn different, we can make sure you have the right resources, be in the right environment, have the right tools, have the right support to excel, right? And I swore it was like all of a sudden I was in a NASCAR race. It went from things slowing down, from me struggling, to all these professors giving me options, right? Right. I was getting my notes, written for me. And I was able to use my tape recorder every time I was in a lecture. I was given more time to take tests and given opportunities to either take an exam or complete a hands-on project that was more kinesthetic. And I went from this student that was placed on academic probation to actually started getting like B minuses and C pluses. And Nicholas pulled me aside again. He goes, listen, I don't think we could offer you everything you need. Right. And I thought that maybe he's just wanted me out. Right. Maybe he had enough. Like, maybe he put too much work into me and he's just tired. And he goes, no. There's a college out there that will be great for you, Emad. They're a great school. They offer distance learning. Right. They work with people like you, people that are trying to balance life, family, and school. And then people that need more hands-on, individualized attention, people that are more kinesthetic learners. So he's explaining this school to me. And he brought me to what is SUNY Empire State College, which is the first state university in New York to focus on adult learning. And just like Dardell, he did everything he could to get me accepted. He introduced me to people. He helped review my essays. He wrote me a recommendation letter. And just like that, I was accepted. And here's the thing. This is like when we talk about distance learning, this is before online learning. This is when they used to send you a VHS tape. Like, I don't know how old, some of you are, but we used to get an actual VHS tape in the mail with cue cards. I don't even know if they still make cue cards, but with cue cards, a cassette. So you get a packet, right? And the packet is a schedule, and you have to complete watching this video that looks like a PBS special, right? Read your books, write an essay, and then also meet with your mentor to go over your work, right? That was distance learning, right? And your professors were not traditional professors. They were also practitioners. They were people in the field, right? And you sometimes had to meet with them at a coffee shop or at a library, and then they work with you. And then you might have a small group study session, right? So all of a sudden, I went from this struggling student that was barely graduating high school, that was placed on academic probation in community college, to getting A's at Empire State College. To actually seeing my progress. My writing was improving, right? My note taking was improving, right? Also, my self-esteem started improving. And what seemed like forever to complete high school, I completed my associates in 1 year after being at Empire State College, right? And then it took me another year to complete my bachelor's at Empire State College. And I was like, oh, this felt amazing. This was like a new addiction to me, right? This was like Kanye West's first album, The College Dropout. And I wanted more. Like, I wanted more of this feeling, because all of a sudden, what I didn't realize was my environment started changing, right? My network started changing. Opportunities were growing because my self-esteem was growing, right? And then, the people that I surrounded myself, the people that I grew up, they also saw this. They also saw this change in me. And they also pushed me. They also advocated for me, right? So it was like, that scene in Rocky where the community came out and my friends around me, they started pushing me forward, right? The professors started pushing me forward. And then all of a sudden I was like, I needed more, right? So I went to pursue my master's. And while pursuing my master's, I started a business. I started a nonprofit, right? That nonprofit grew and eventually grew to a trade association. And then it became a consulting firm that we transformed from a nonprofit to a for-profit. So all of a sudden I became this entrepreneur that was speaking at Syracuse University, at Cornell University. And then I went on to complete 2 masters, right? So I went from a student that barely graduated high school to completing 2 masters and eventually pursued my doctorate, right? And it did not take me, 5, 10 years to complete my doctorate like my peers. It took me 3 years. I completed my doctorate in 3 years. And it was like I said, it was like a quick roller coaster, but every time I hit this milestone, something in me grew, something in me transformed, right? And I started doing more community work. I started advocating for people in need. I started working with at-risk families and children, mentored young people to get into college, to graduate college, right? And through my hard work, I was recognized by the Chicago School of Professional Psychology with an honorary PhD. And the same school that I struggle with, that I spent 4 years at, Onondaga Community College, gave me an honorary associate degree. Now I get to have this amazing job where I travel the country, speaking at graduations, at events, at trade shows, motivating and inspiring people to fulfill their dreams, to pursue their dreams, to transform their lives. And I get to work with young people, right? And see this change and see that change and see them, and see their excitement, right? And I have the privilege to mentor young people all over the country and follow their story from high school all the way to college, all the way to their careers. And college and non-traditional education played a critical role in that. I would not be here if it wasn't for non-traditional education, if it wasn't for universities providing distance learning for someone like me, right? So even now, I continue to give back by working in this field, right? I've been a dean at Colorado Technical University, at Strayer University, at SUNY Morrisville State College. I've taught at SUNY Empire State College, and I'm now an endowed chair at Bellevue University, which focuses heavily on distance learning. And I've also been able to travel the country talking about distance learning to institutions and countries that don't have this option, that don't have the technology. I've been to Kosovo, I've been to Costa Rica, Montenegro, just traveled all all throughout the country, meeting with students and politicians to talk about the benefits of distance education and how powerful that tool is to help transform communities. In this picture here are the two people that helped change my life, right? The left side is Willie Dardell, right? The person I spoke to you about that back in high school, and Judge James McKinney, who was the first Black first Black judge in the city of Syracuse, who gave me chances after chances after chances. Right? This is my family. This is my wife. This is our picture 22 years ago. So we're celebrating our 23rd year anniversary next year. And this is my family. This is my beautiful family, right? So that completes my presentation. You know, the thing is, when it comes to distance education, it's always changing, right? We're going through this big evolution, and we have the opportunity to provide more access to students from different backgrounds, but also make it more inclusive, right? Because even though distance education was created to meet the demands of non-traditional students, there are a lot of students that don't have the technology, right? That don't have the resource. So even though we are trying to make it accessible for everybody, it's still not as inclusive as it needs to be, right? So we all need to work together to figure out how do we get access to distance education, especially in the high schools, because many students are still struggling in public schools, getting access to technology, getting access to wireless so they can get their work done. So I thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to speak with you and the opportunity to share my story. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rahim, for sharing your powerful story, your inspiring story. I mean, I know we're all in different spaces, but I was laughing out loud with the water pool of drool collecting off the desk. So thank you for that. At this point, Adil President Aisha Haynes and I will be leading a Q&A with Dr. Rahim. We do have the chat feature. If you have any questions that you would like Aisha and I to ask Dr. Rahim, please, by all means, feel free to put those in the chat, and we're happy to do that. Yeah, I'm just going to echo comments I'm seeing in the chat about thank you for that moving message. But yeah, in the meantime, I'll pass the baton to Aisha to ask her first question.
All right. Our first question is, how did your earlier career choices lead you to where you are now?
You know, a lot of my career choices in the beginning were not career choices, right? It was, you were just surviving, right? And sometimes opportunities come your way and you have to figure out how to take advantage of it. So I was working in nonprofits already. So in my community, I was a caseworker. I was like a social worker. I work with at-risk families and at-risk kids in foster programs. And I saw that there was this need that was not being fulfilled, that while we were focusing on the community we were serving, which is great, it's great that we're doing these things, the people that were providing the service were often struggling with professional development, right? So, here's a social worker, here's a caseworker that is spending 24 hours a day working with these families and traveling and advocating for them. They were struggling trying to find additional funds to complete their degree program, to continue their professional development, to keep their license and things like that. So I started working with the local community college, with Syracuse University, and me and two PhD students actually started the Human Service Association of Central New York, where we started giving free professional development to all of these licensed practitioners and caseworkers so they can keep their license and get credit by experience. And then we end up getting grants from different organizations to do this. We end up getting funding from Syracuse University. So it just kind of grew. And that's how I got started, right? And that in itself was non-traditional in a sense of what we were doing.
Yeah. One thing that hit me, so Ahmad, you give a very powerful story about your experience, and it's a chance for you to tell your story. You've also had experiences where other people are telling your story, whether that's in the movie that was made about your story, or the acclaimed playwright depicting your story in play. How is it different between you telling your story versus seeing somebody else take your story and share it?
It's very humbling when you see that and when you hear it. Um, but it also allows you to reflect, right? And when I first, saw my story in a documentary, or when I was able to first share my story on stage, it allowed me to really reflect on my journey, right? And to honor those people that help support me and push me. Because sometimes when you're living your life, you're just going through the motion. You're just trying to survive, right? You don't really get a chance to reflect. You don't get a chance to truly understand and look back at your accomplishments, at your own journey, right? We're just going through the motion. And I think that's often something we all struggle with, right? We're all working on 9 to 5, right? We're taking care of our family. We're trying to pursue this education at the same time. So it's often very difficult, to reflect and understand where we came from and know where we're going. And that's why I mentioned that a lot of it is just sometimes luck, right? And opportunities, coming in front of you. It's not until you get it. It's not until you get a chance to reflect and know where you came from to actually create a foundation and a plan to figure out what's next, like to actually create a strategy to pursue your goals, right? Because right now you're just going through the motion. So that's what it did for me, was when I was given the opportunity to hear my story and see my story, it allowed me to say, wow, I've accomplished a lot, but now I need to figure out what's next. What do I need to do to move things forward? But it also allowed me to understand the value of hearing other people's story, right? To be this active listener, to give other people this chance to be vulnerable, because sharing your story makes you very vulnerable, right? And you have to be conscious of a person being vulnerable, right? Taking their time to share a little bit about themselves. So you have to respect that space, right? And show some empathy, right, towards that situation, towards the circumstances, and figure out how you could support that person in their journey.
Question come through in the chat. Are there any authors you would recommend rereading?
I when it comes to stories, I love biographies, right? I'm a biography guy, right? And I love stories that make connections to what's happening, right? So I'm kind of like a social scientist in so many ways. So I love Malcolm Gladwell's books. So I'm a big Malcolm Gladwell. It's not necessarily like motivational, right? But it allowed me to connect the dots. Like the first Malcolm Gladwell book I actually read was the Outlier, right? And that showed stories of people, accomplishing things, and also people that did not, hit their mark. But he showed, in addition to this 10,000 hour theories, is that sometimes we sacrifice things, and people around us sacrifice things in order for us to be here, right? And that's what I took away, was that what he was saying was that, like, these people did not make it on their own, right? All these people we admire, all these people that accomplish these great things, while they hit this 10,000 hours that we talked about, but there were a lot of people around them that made that possible, right? That supported them, that loved them, that pushed them. And then there were examples of people that were very intelligent, right? That were, that had this amazing IQ, but they did not meet their potentials and they didn't have nobody in their corner. So I would definitely recommend The Tipping Point. Was it David and Goliath, right? And I'm also a big fan of people like John Maxwell, those leadership books, that 21 Laws of Leadership, or even someone like I like what's his name? Like Cornel West. I'm a big fan of Cornel West also.
Definitely adding some books to the reading list. Here's a great question in the chat. What advice would you give to help faculty, to help academic staff, really to help anybody who's working in education to support at-risk distance learning students?
Okay. Oh, the author I was talking about was Eric Mike Dyson. Yeah. So to answer that question, right? I think first off, faculty, we can't assume, what is best when it comes to our students, right? So an example is that, when we teach online, we are given certain tools, right? We are given certain structures, and we're given certain flexibility, right? So whether we're teaching on Blackboard, whether it's Moodle or Canvas, we have this structure. And the longer we teach in this structure, we create boundaries, even without even thinking. Like, we create boundaries. Like, we have 2 assignments each week. We have a quiz in the middle of the semester, right? And then we have this final project. And then we require our students to stick to this structure, right? And that structure becomes no different than the traditional classroom structure that these students are trying to get away from, right? Right? Because we're trying to create we're trying to offer this non-traditional platform, this non-traditional way of learning to these adult students. But then we slowly started creating structure that looks very similar to the in-classroom environment, right? So my thing is that in order to be inclusive, in order to help your students further, we have to better understand the needs of our students versus the needs of us being instructors for this classroom, right? So, for example, in the beginning of the semester, I would, in addition to sending emails out to students, my schedule is a lot more flexible. I'm not saying everybody does do this, but I call my students, right? I give them a call. They don't pick up, I leave a message, right? And then in my email and in my announcements, I give them options. You do have a textbook, right? These are the recommended reading assignments that support the learning outcomes. But here are some additional resources. Here are some YouTube clips. Here's some audio. Here's some quick exams. I provide multiple things for them. And then the following week, because you do have tools that allow you to see what students are clicking, right? You could see if they are listening to that podcast, if they're actually clicking on the YouTube, and things that students are not really using, they start disappearing, and I include other things, right? And then I do a temperature check, so 3 weeks later, I check in and say, hey, how you doing? Do you understand this? Do you need more? I try to do like a conference call. And sometimes you might have 2 out of 25 students show up, and you're going to be disappointed, right? But if those 2 students get value out of it, then you did your job. And sometimes the next group of students, those 2 students told other students, and then it grows, right? But it's the opportunity for the students to speak out, listen to their story, listen to their journey, and then you can figure out how you could play a role in this education experience, right? So yes, so my recommendation is, let's work together to create less boundaries in this online environment. Let's be more creative, right? Let's work together to be more creative, innovative, to provide more resources, more support. And instead of being a lecturer, let's be involved in the academic journey. Let's be a partner.
Well, Rich, I think we're at the top of the hour. I think we're at the end of this note. And
We are. I'm gonna, if it's okay, Dr. Rahim, if we may go just a little bit longer.
Okay.
I know we have another question. If you got it, I want to respect your time. If you need to hit the road, by all means.
No, please.
All righty. Aisha, do you have another question handy?
Okay, yes. As you look out today, what in the next, this is a question from the chat. Let me see if I can make sure I get it right. I guess, what do you see in the next 5 to 10 years, and what do you see? What do you want to do and impact? So, okay. What are some of the things that you see in the next 5 to 10 years, and what do you want to do, and how do you want to make an impact?
The AI is just transforming, higher education, right? I was able to sit into this demonstration before COVID that just blew my mind. And it was this adaptive learning software where 2 students could be in the same classroom, and the screen would constantly change based on the AI assessing how you are typing and what tabs you seem to be clicking on the most. And all of a sudden, one student, their resources look very different than this student's resource. right? Because the AI realized this person's more kinesthetic, they need more audio, they need more visual. And this other person, they seem to read more, they spend more time reading, right? So it's going to give them more of these lectures, more of these notes. And it noticed that this person's right-handed or this person's left-handed, right? So that's the amazing piece. And then part of the adaptive learning software, it started noticing like gaps, right? In your learning based on your assignments, right? So instead of giving you the same type of assignments, it focuses on those weaknesses to strengthen it, right? And it alerted the professor, right? So instead of you waiting for the student to submit an assignment late, it started noticing the student is struggling and alerted you ahead of time. So the student, often students are intimidated by professors, right? So and I guarantee you all had this where your student don't check in with you until it's like 6 weeks later and they're like 8 assignments behind, right? So we're intimidating, and it becomes more intimidating when we're online and they don't see us, right? They don't see us. They don't. There's not live lectures, so it becomes more intimidating when it's online. So I think with AI, it's evolving more and more. We just have to figure out as professors how do we become more how do we take advantage of this, right? Don't let this technology become the teacher. Like it should be a tool for teachers, but it shouldn't be the teacher itself, right? So I think we need to be more involved, and I see that technology playing a bigger role in academia, and even in public school, right? And the other piece about impact, I think when it comes to the work that I do, I want to make a bigger shift to high schools because I saw this huge learning gap when COVID hit, right? There's a lot of young people struggling, um, you know, um, getting the technology, getting the resource, or just finding a quiet place, to do their homework. Um, so this is something we didn't really anticipate, or didn't, or we were aware, we just didn't know the magnitude of it. So when COVID hit, my school district was scrambling and making sure that students got, access to computers, but these students didn't have access to wireless, right? So the computers didn't mean anything, right? And then students also needed access to a quiet place because now they're home babysitting all of their siblings because everyone's home and their parents, they had to work. So making, in regards to making more meaningful impact, I want to take or start doing more and more work with public schools in regards to this, and figure out how institutions like ours, how universities, how foundations, how community colleges and trade schools could work more actively with public schools to fill that void.
Thank you so much, Ahmad. At this point, I will kind of use this as an opportunity to kind of wrap things up and highlight what's going to be coming up next. But again, thank you so much, Dr. Rahim, for a powerful speech. Thank you for your insights on these things too. Really, really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. And I'm gonna put my email and my contact information in the chat box. But it's
Oh,
wonderful. It's wonderful, everybody. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. And here's what I love about these sort of things: with the power of technology, email, LinkedIn, etc., conversations don't have to end here. It can be just a
Exactly.
start. Yeah. And another thing. Yep. Thank you very much. Alrighty, I am going to put another link also into the chat. We have at 3:15 Eastern time, we have a roundtable, an informal discussion for anyone who would like to spend more time talking and thinking and reflecting about Dr. Rahim's keynote speech. Again, I've just put the link to the Zoom room in there. It's also in the conference program. Much thanks to Kim Livengood and Evan Smith for leading a discussion. Again, it's just kind of a chance to here's the topic, reflecting on the keynote speech that we just heard. But it's also a chance to kind of get to know our conference attendees a little bit more too. Oh, and then, no, thank you, Holly, for that. I know Ahmad just put his LinkedIn in the chat, and then I'm going to put that in. Yeah, perhaps it was sent. I'm going to put that in the copy and paste. And I'm going to put a couple other links that Ahmad has shared in there too. Thank you so much, Holly, for pointing that out. And then we also have Twitter and Pinterest handles. Yeah, and in addition to that, for anyone who would like to continue networking at 4:15 Eastern Time, we have Adil's very own Aisha Haynes, Bill Davis, and Sarah Corpy will be leading a networking event. So just another chance to putting that in the chat too. Another Instagram handle for Dr. Ahmad Rahim, some chances to connect on social media. But yeah, we have a networking event where just a chance to kind of get to know each other. Conversing some informal chats in the online virtual space, but there's also some really cool discussion that our networking team has put together. So with that in mind, that wraps up our keynote discussion and the ensuing Q&A. Continued thanks everybody for being a part of this discussion, for hearing this powerful and inspiring story. Again, we have roundtable coming up and then a networking event. And then Tuesday, we have a lot of wonderful presentations that I'm looking forward to. Again, we have our asynchronous portions too between the e-posters and the course showcase. That's all I have for now. Anything I'm forgetting, Aisha?
No, I think that's it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for celebrating distance education with us. And we're looking forward to seeing you everybody at the next events. Enjoy the rest of your Monday, everybody.